let's talk about some tactics, right? We've scared you at this point. Hopefully you understand why we say, criminals do everything they can to avoid this stuff as well, because they don't want to be tracked. But here's all the ways that maybe you might want to behave like a criminal. So let's talk about what you need to do, right? We've covered a lot of these, but I want to give you some very specific tips that I like to use when I'm trying to do things like red team exercises or things like that, right? Buy in cash, right? If you can buy in cash, buy in cash. Pretty straightforward, right? But you might say, oh, well, I go to the bank and then they go to the bank and I take out $1,000 or whatever it is. One of the things I love to do is farmers market ATMs. Anywhere where you have a festival or a farmers market or something where it is not set up for surveillance. There's not cameras everywhere and they stand up one of those little sketchy ATMs. Yeah, go get some cash out of that. Might there be a skimmer on it? Sure, absolutely. Might there be one at your bank? Yeah, absolutely. But I can guarantee you that little ATM that somebody stood up to get your $5 transaction fee, they probably have absolutely no real logs as to how you're getting cash out of there that you can then move into a gift card. And that's really the whole thing, right? It's going through and removing the trace back, that pattern of life that John was talking about. Once it goes from the ATM to cash to a gift card, it's really hard to trace those transactions after that. I'd already mentioned the gift cards like Bluebird, those kind of things. You can go into your Walmart, your CVS, your whatnot, and say, here's my cash, please preload this onto here. And that is on that card no matter what, whether you set up an account or not, right? You do need to figure out what those limits are on those cards. They are different. So read the terms and agreements on those cards. Do not buy used. I've had so many people go, well, I'll just go to a pawn shop and I'll buy whatever laptop's there. And then the government won't know I've got it. Yeah, guess what? Those laptops were probably stolen in the first place and maybe even potentially filled with things that you don't want on them. And now suddenly you've got a bunch of malware beaconing back that you're doing things that you didn't even intend on doing. You intended on doing completely different, naughty things. So don't buy used, buy cheap stuff. Buy Chromebooks, buy Windows 11 Chromebooks. I've got a bunch that we bought for like $100, right? And they'll do everything. They'll do your email. They'll do this. They'll do that. And you can just dispose of them, right? You can say, forget it. There's $100. Every so often, I'm just going to swap this out. So if there are any hardware identifiers, if I am making a footprint, I just stop, right? But you can also, and we're going to talk about this, and somebody already mentioned this inside of here, you can also plug Tails in. It's a little USB device, right? It's a little USB flash drive. And you load up Tails, and it can be a read-only operating system, boot to that, and now you don't even have any data on the laptop. Now you've got this USB drive, you take it, you destroy it, you wipe it, you do whatever, but Tails is designed to not maintain any data anyway. So now you've got 2 layers of clean environment, right? And then, like I said, prepaid services, we mentioned those. This is a tip that remember how I said you got to plot, plan, and organize, and if you need it, it's already too late? I've got in here, whenever you buy this stuff, put it in a closet. Don't boot it up. Don't use it for 90 to 366 days. Why so long, Ian? Great question. Surveillance cameras. It is incredibly expensive for large big box stores to store all the video footage from all the cameras that are there. They don't keep it forever. They only keep it if there's a legal hold. If someone says, we think someone did something naughty, give us that video. If that doesn't happen anywhere between 90 days, and it's generally 90, but all the way up to 366 days, so a year cycle, if that doesn't happen, the video goes away for the most part, right? It can't be subpoenaed. It cannot be pulled. It cannot be used because it doesn't exist. No one can ask for it. So I like to do that. I like to have a couple things. If I've got a little spare money, I'm like, all right, let me grab this device. I'm going to put it in the closet. And I'm just going to sit, right? And then always keeping up with gray man theory. I wanted to do a demo, but I think we'll do this as a follow-up webcast. I have these IR LEDs and a camera set up to do it where literally on a brim or even a smaller device than this, it just makes your entire face glow. Now, that itself, if a security guard is watching it, they're going to go, why is that person's face glowing? But if all you're trying to do is obfuscate yourself from recording that isn't monitored, when they go back and look later and they say, well, who is that? Don't know. We can't see their face because most security cameras have the IR filter removed to enhance night vision. So it allows you to not only blend in, but leave even less of a footprint. Now, last couple things here. We're running out of time here. So the activating gear, set up accounts whenever you're at unusual locations. So when you do get to the point where you're like, all right, let me pull this Chromebook out. Don't boot it up at your house. Don't connect it to your Wi-Fi. You don't want that footprint. What's that? You're muted, John.
This for sure.
Yeah. If you are traveling somewhere that you've never been and you're driving through a small town, there's some public Wi-Fi and you've got one of those devices with you that you've never booted up in any location where you're at, set it up with one of these burner accounts that you can create. So go to Google, go to Apple while you're in those locations on public Wi-Fi, create accounts while you're there that aren't tied to you, that aren't tied to anything else. And then also use passphrases. You don't need to use big complicated passwords. The idea is these are burner accounts. You're going to throw them away. So use passphrases, 3 words together, correct horse battery staple if you're an XKCD fan, because then you can remember it and you don't have to write it down. And then it lives in here, right? So if you do need an email address, 10-minute email. You can search for 10-minute email on Google. And what it does is it spins up a web browser-based email account with a custom address. And when you go to get that registration, it says, click on this. This is my email. You can use that. Yes, thank you. The hoodie that, so whoever just shared that, it went by so quick. Hacker hoodie blind surveillance cameras. Yes, NYT Shadow 42. I love those. My oldest son has one. And guess what? He got it from not Abercrombie and Fitch, one of Hollister. Hollister was selling it for $100. And I was like, oh, and they didn't have one in plus dad sizes. So I was sad. But yeah, so change accounts and devices often and never use your burner devices where you sleep. If I'm in my house, those devices that I purchased to be anonymous for engagements and whatnot, they don't get connected to this Wi-Fi. They do not get a footprint tied to this house. Someone mentioned, when are we going to talk about RFID bags? If you needed that in your bingo card, here you go. I like to use, was it Silent, not Silent Circle, Silent, I'd have to look it up. But RFID bags to say, all right, before I take this gear back to the house, now that it has been activated, I'm going to put it in an RFID bag so it doesn't have a chance to connect to anything and it doesn't leave a trail the entire way back to the house as it's trying to connect to Wi-Fi and discover and whatnot. So you never want to do that. And then always think about where you go and where you sleep, right? Where you sleep should be very private. It should be as protected as possible, right? But if you can't do that, right? Think about duress messages, especially if you're someone who's a survivor of domestic abuse or things like that, or you're an activist who's being actively targeted by an authoritarian regime or a journalist. Have the type of phrases that you can communicate in the clear to let people know that you are either safe or that you are not safe, right? And not to contact you again, because by continuing to contact you, they may be unsafe. To say, when someone says, hey, how's your kid? And you go, oh, yeah, Johnny's fine. You don't have a kid named Johnny. If they say Johnny's fine, that means don't call again, don't write, I'm in danger, and you could be in danger. So you can set those kind of things up. I already mentioned the festivals and markets. If you need to lose a tail or you think you're being tailed, going to a place that has a low level of surveillance and a high level of people, very, very good. And then also, we're going to mention briefly the things that probably everybody knows, right? Use VPNs, use Tor. Now, Tor, you got to think about who your threat is. If it's a nation state, Tor's probably not going to help you. If you're just trying not to let people know whatever proclivities you have that happen to spark your fancy, which is the nicest way I can say that, Tor may be okay. PGP and Signal, right? Always think about the ways your connections transverse what you touch as you move and what people can see as you do it. Technology doesn't matter at that point. Now you're just saying, I need to minimize that footprint. And if you do that, whatever the new technology is, and you think that way, you're going to be able to protect yourself. So, John, you want to cover this real quick? I know we're heading up on the end of the hour.
If we go over, we go over. Once
okay.
This will be recorded, this will be loaded. There's no hard stop. I do have a meeting, but I want to finish this out. I think this is an important one. I found this wonderful picture of Corey, Dr. Al, which I thought was great. And basically, we have a bunch of people that say you could use Linux, and that is absolutely something a Linux person would say. And it's kind of a solution, though not really. the bigger issue of what's going on right now is Corey had this great presentation on called the Coming War on General Purpose Computing. And the gist of it is whenever you're buying an Android or an Apple or even Microsoft Windows 11, you're buying a platform, and that platform is controlled by the company that developed that platform. And like, if you're looking at an Android device, there's no easy way that you can just simply proxy all the encrypted traffic to do analysis and research on what the apps are doing and how they're actually collecting and how they're utilizing your information. They don't want you to see that data. They don't want you to know that. So when we're looking at this, it's a much larger issue than just Linux or Windows or wherever. It's an issue of having the right tools to do the analysis that we need to get a better understanding of what these people are doing with our data. With full control, you have the ability to go research. And you all that are here, you have the skills to be able to start researching and trying to hold some of these people accountable. But it's a complicated thing. You hear a lot of people right now talking about TikTok. I'm going to make one more point and then I'm going to get the hell off of it as quickly as possible. When you hear a lot of people talking about TikTok, yeah, TikTok's probably controlled by the Chinese. That's probably a real thing. Bummer. And there's a bunch of senators and Congress people that are talking about it in terms of we need to ban TikTok to save America. They honestly don't give a rat's ass about saving America. What's going on is something like 100 million Americans are spending 90 minutes a day on TikTok. And if they're spending 90 minutes a day on TikTok, they're not spending 90 minutes a day on Facebook. They're not spending 90 minutes a day on Netflix. They're not spending 90 minutes a day surfing the web. They're on TikTok. And the people that control these technologies, they're the ones that are driving this. It has nothing to do with, oh, we're going to save America. It's everything to do with the fact that they want that sweet, sweet ad data. And I have no solution for this. We don't have a phone that is a usable phone by my aunts and my uncles that is an open source platform for us to be able to run about our lives. You have to use Apple. You have to use Android. And that's horrible. All right. So giving it back to you, I think I might have another slide. Okay, another slide.
I think you mentioned the cell phones, but yeah, go
Cell
on.
phones, they track you all the time, everywhere. And don't get mad about it. That's the way they have to work. For the magical signals to go from my box here that I'm holding in my hand, sending it to Ian, the cell phone towers here have to be able to find Ian and track where he's at to send it to the cell phone tower that's closest to him so he can receive a phone call. That's the way the system works, folks. So as soon as you're running a phone, there's absolutely nothing that you can do about it. At some level, that phone is going to be tracked. Ian's already talked a little bit about activating burner phones and how to do those things as well. Also, this is funny, but Verizon and AT&T are adding in additional advertising tracking heading information in the actual like RF band on your cell phone that you have no access to see. So they're actually tagging you for advertisements on your phone as well. So there you go. All right, next slide. So family and friends, if you ever have to live like a criminal, you're screwed if you're around them. Duck Dynasty. I used to have an OSINT challenge with Duck Dynasty. I said, hey, go find where these people lived. And it was easy because one of them went on, I think it was some late night show, and they said that this was their address. So that was easy to find the address of one person that was on Duck Dynasty. However, the other people were a lot more difficult. But if you actually sat down and you started playing with the Twitter data and the geolocation data, and you got off the main people in the show, and you started going to their brothers and sisters who were very public in the Duck Dynasty Corporation, then you found their children who were also very active on Twitter and on Instagram. Then you could start doing geolocation tagging of their friends and their family. And even though the main person that you were going after wouldn't give up their location and their social media profiles, people they hung out with did. And that would allow you to find the homes where these people actually lived. So let's revisit a smart criminal. This is something that Ian mentioned earlier. Let's say a smart criminal did everything well, right? They went and they got a burner phone, they activated it somewhere else, like a McDonald's, and they sat on that burner phone for a month or two. Then they started using it. And that might be difficult to track in that situation. However, you can absolutely track your friends and your family. And if that burner phone comes into a pattern of life again, around your friends and your family, that burner phone sets up a signal flare if it's in the middle of a bunch of other normal phones that are out there, right? They absolutely can track your friends. They absolutely can track your family. And that's oftentimes good enough for you to track your awkward family and friend circle and enough to actually track you. So if you're looking to actually bug out and bug out for real, don't ever go back to your friends and family. That's just kind of a scary thing, but we'll get to that. All right, Ian.
Yeah, to quote the great Robert De Niro from the classic Heat, do not be prepared to drop anything when you feel the heat is coming, right? And that's really what we're talking about. This police and authoritarian regimes and abusers know that you're going to want to reach out to your friends and family to let them know you're safe or to talk to them, and so that's who they target. So what should you use? I mean, I love the chatter that's going on in Discord because there's a ton of it. A couple people have asked about phones and mentioned Pine Phone. That actually is something that's coming along pretty well, but it's not ready to be a daily driver. Like, you're not going to hand this to your, like I said, aunt or uncle or a non-technical relative and have them be able to use it effectively. Like, if you're on this webcast, you're likely a big nerd like us, and maybe that's interesting to you, but it's not ready as a daily driver. Someone also asked, what phones would you suggest? And there was a couple good answers, but my answer is always going to be anything that you can get at a 7-Eleven for cash that is a smartphone. So like I went and looked last night, and there's like Android track phones. They're not going to have the best processor. They're not going to have the best screen. They're not going to have all that. Can you register a Google account with them? Absolutely. Are they $49 cash, walk out the door and go activate the SIM, somewhere that isn't where you sleep? Absolutely.
When you activate them in the parking lot, because that's usually where people activate them. If you get 5 burner phones, do not activate them all in the same place, because that sets up an absolute signal flare.
So here's some of the things that we would recommend, right? So Signal is a great tool. Signal is if you're looking for kind of texting options that aren't WhatsApp or whatnot, if you're unfamiliar with it, Signal is a fantastic tool for end-to-end encryption. John's already mentioned privacy.com quite a bit. There's free services for privacy.com. 10 virtual credit cards that, like you said, you can tie to things, and that's going to help minimize that kind of corporate data model. For somebody who can get a warrant, well, they can go directly to the credit card companies and the purchasers and merchants and processors. VPN. You'll notice we didn't talk about VPN a lot. VPN's important. Don't get me wrong, but
whole nother webcast. Webcast. Yep.
But if you're looking for one that, if you're familiar with managing something and you want something that you have full control over, the one that I would recommend from Trail of Bits is Algo VPN. And you can deploy those in AWS or Azure. You can use gift cards. You can use credits that are free. And now you're going to make that threat actor take that many more steps to get to you, right? We mentioned Tails, those USB drives. Cannot recommend that type of thing enough because it is cheap. You plug it in to an asset, a desktop, a laptop, whatever, and throw it away. And then Tor. I mentioned Tor because everyone's going to ask about Tor. I'm actually not the world's biggest fan of Tor. It's slow. There's it also sets up an identifier. Like, there's lots of people using VPNs. If you start using Tor, it actually will cause more scrutiny on what you're doing as well. Got a few more slides here from you, John.
All right. So I want to talk a little bit about conspiracies. I know a little bit about what I talked about and Ian talked about is a little conspiracy theorist type stuff. And I want you to know that conspiracies are real. The real conspiracies out there are boring. They tend to be called laws. They tend to be written by attorneys. He showed the amazing wall of the end user licensing agreements. That's a conspiracy, right? Ad tracking is a lot like this as well. And when we're looking at conspiracies, as a conspiracy like the entire government's ran by lizard people, that's a really nice conspiracy that fits in one sentence and people can grok it. It's like, yes, that makes sense to me. Whenever you talk about actual real conspiracies, they tend to be a lot more complicated. I talk to a lot of friends and family about taxes. BHIS could absolutely be in a position where we don't pay taxes. I'm going to oversimplify it a little bit, but the gist is you would start an overseas company. That overseas company would be in a country that has no income tax or sales tax or any number of different taxes. There's tons of tax shelter countries out there. Start that company up, have that company sue Black Hills Information Security. When Black Hills Information Security settles out of court that particular lawsuit for that particular bit of damage that was done between the two companies, when I lose money in Black Hills Information Security, it counts as a loss. When the other company actually gets it, it doesn't constitute as a loss, because when you sue someone, you're restoring what was lost to them. So it doesn't count as income. Congratulations, I just took my taxable income, shifted it over to another country. I get a debit card. Congratulations, I don't pay taxes. Most people, when I tell these stories, with the extra steps involved and some extra countries that are needed, their eyes glass over and they get really bored and they start swirling their drink, hoping that'll shut the hell up. That is a real conspiracy. That isn't some illegal thing. That is the way the law is actually written, so you can do that. The loopholes are not loopholes. They're built-in features of the system. And when you're looking at these ad tracking networks and how huge they are, this tech is moving too fast. It is far too complicated. There is very little the United States government can do, except for one thing. I wish the government could do this, because I believe they could wave a magic wand and they could fix it. If they set up ad tracking data as personally identifiable and PHI, personal health information, it had to be protected at the level that it would be with HIPAA, and HIPAA requirements would be applied to it. It would end this crap tomorrow. But that's how the internet makes money. And if you really want to know how to hide from a government, if you really want to do it right, talk to these people. Because you live in a society that has a series of rules to actually function as a normal human being. As much as we talk about all of this stuff and hiding, the only way that you can truly hide is by completely dumping yourself off of the system. And as Ian said, becoming a gray person. You're no longer visible. No one sees you. No one cares about you. That is the homeless population around the world. Do me a favor. Google how many homeless people exist in the United States alone.
No, that's a great point, John. So one quick thing here before we kind of wrap this up. Victoria put a great note inside here. Say, why throw away thumb drives? Just reformat the thumb drive and reinstall the tails, right? Yeah, no, absolutely. You could do that. But whether it be USB thumb drive serial numbers or whatnot, you'll notice I said cheap. Buy a cheap Chromebook. Buy a cheap this. Buy a cheap that. Reason being is you should always just get rid of it. Get rid of it. Don't use it again. Cycle those things, because just because there isn't an OSINT or an Intel Technique process that can currently be used with that hardware doesn't mean there won't be one. And that's how a lot of evidence works. They will keep that evidence until they can tie it to something, and then now it's all back together. So if you have the opportunity just to switch devices, not use the same device again, that is the best way to make sure that hardware device isn't leaving an additional digital footprint. So if we aren't in jail, come hang with us. We are going to be out at B-Sides Charm. We're going to be at B-Sides Rochester. We're going to be at KernelCon. We're going to be at RSA. We're going to be Prompt Zine we talked about during pre-show banter. Sign up for that. We've got our AC Hunter Community Edition. You can download that now and start playing with it. We've got our we have so much more stuff. And we want you to come hang with us, because we love talking to you, meeting with you, and learning what you're concerned about and trying to figure out how we can help. So,
and now we just want to talk with you. Just want to chat. Just chat. What questions do people have?
Tons and tons of questions. So most of the questions are around, and actually, Jason, you've probably been tracking. Do you have some here that you want to bring up?
Just a lot of conversation. Like, this is probably the most conversation we've ever had. Either people just chiming in with their own tidbits, or just mind blown a little bit. So let me dig through and see what you got.
Lots of people real happy that their mind has been blown. So that's
also
is privacy.com international.
Yeah, so they're credit cards. They're valid credit cards, and they work everywhere that accepts credit cards. Also, we're really sorry. There's no unifying answer for everything that we talked about. This is the way the world works now. Get used to it. Sorry.
Yeah. There's a bunch of questions here, and I'm going to summarize them. There's some about EFF and Citizens Lab, others about some of the other privacy tools, and basically they were all summarized as, well, how do you know that we can trust them, that they haven't been compromised? And the short answer is you can't.
You don't. You'd actually mentioned some stuff during the Cold War and Moscow rules. One of the things that's very interesting, if you actually go and do some research on the psyche of people that were that were actual spies, is a lot of them, they started developing mental breaks and they started going insane. And the reason why is because they thought they were constantly being watched. They thought they were constantly being tracked by the Russians. And the same thing happened on the Russian side as well. They thought they were constantly being tracked. It was every car was following them. Every camera was tracking them. And at some point, you just have to live your freaking life. I mean, you can get so paranoid in all these different things and how they're actually tracking you. The only advice that I can give you, especially if you're trying to deal with a dystopian state or an authoritarian state or someplace like that, is a lot of bureaucracies are incredibly incompetent. While there's a lot of data that exists in multiple different places, it's very rare for people in law enforcement or other places to be able to tie it all together appropriately in a way that it actually works. So I apologize that that's kind of a crappy answer, that we're waiting on the incompetence. Most of the time, video camera surveillance footage is actually used after the fact. So something happens, then they pull the footage. You don't see a lot of like, we're going to track this person's face everywhere. Now, Singapore has a system that's very close to that. And their capability and what they can do is much higher than most other countries because they're far more centralized in those cameras. So you can look at them as a model. Also, China, I hear a lot of cities in China have that type of capability and tracking as well. By and large,
let's not just pick on Asia. The UK and London is one of the most surveilled cities on the planet.
But the cameras in London, a lot of them are owned privately by a variety of different companies and businesses. Fair. It isn't at the level where it's centralized in the ability to track it throughout the entire system like you would see in China or Singapore.
Gotcha. Some of the other questions that we've got inside of here, where was the one I just had here? What is a good place to learn, and this is from an anonymous attendee, to learn non-classified tradecraft? John might have a different answer than I do, but the book that I mentioned at the beginning from Michael Basil, a lot of those OSINT techniques, those are the same techniques that are, I mean, it's no different.
Been using them forever.
Yeah.
Yep. And also you mentioned the Spy Museum. The US Spy Museum has an amazing website. And the thing I love about that is it's not just hypothetical tradecraft and spycraft. It's real stuff that was actually made public. So check out their website. It is just absolutely amazing.
John, that's a great point. If you are an information security professional and you go back to your boss to talk about ad trackers and whatnot, one of my rules when presenting to executives is no James Bond, no Jason Bourne theatrics. I like to have referenceable things. We're like, well, that had never happened. That was just in a movie. And it's like, no, this is history and it's in a book. Yeah. It did happen and here's how it happened. Right. Yep. So the other question we got here from BB155, best way to securely destroy electronics when reaching end of life. I would refer you to a talk done by Deviant Olaf and I forget who else at DEF CON, where they actually tested multiple destruction techniques, including thermite, on devices. But personally, if you've got a spinning platter drive, anything that you can do to bend it. So whether you're using a ammunition base, there's these Tapcons that they sell at like Home Depot, and you can get a little $90 gun and it boom, right through it.
Yeah, just run a drill through it. Yeah. There's a lot of previous research that you see where you can get electron microscope and you can see the actual deformities for the ones and zeros on that. That was basically on a hard drive that was built in the 80s. And that is absolutely not something that's going to happen today. And also, there's not a damn thing that you have that is worth the government pulling out an electron microscope and going through platters to try to read. I'm sorry, you're not that special. And that type of capability, it might be something used for like highly, highly classified secrets, possibly. But for day-to-day stuff, like if they're like, well, we want to see if this guy's surfing porn. No, it's not going to be leveraged for that. It just won't.
So John, do we have a new service now where people send us $5 and we give them all the information about themselves?
No, not yet. I don't want to do that. No. I don't want to do that. But we do actually have a service that we're standing up officially. We've been doing it for a number of years, but we're going to advertise it, is like high net worth, high value people protection and also security assessments. So if you have like CEOs and people in your company that are very, very concerned and you're concerned about them being targeted, hit us up at consulting@Black Hills InfoSec. We actually do an assessment for those people to kind of give them a breakdown of what their profile is and how they can actually hopefully help fix their profile as well.
Nomadic asked, how does privacy.com make money? The short answer is the free service that we talked about, the 10 cards is free. You will quickly run through 10 cards, and there's a paid service that gets you more virtual cards, gets you more.
Yeah, it doesn't take long. Doesn't take long at all.
Okay. Jason, I'm going to call this a wrap unless you see some questions that absolutely should be addressed.
No, I think we're good. We're in overtime right now, and we appreciate the 1,000 people that stuck around with us. And so, Ian, any final words?
If you watched this and were overwhelmed and you think, I can't do this, don't worry. I don't either.
Yeah.
Do what you can with what you feel is comfortable.
And I'm also going to say, if you looked at a lot of this and keep it in the back of your head, I hope to God that none of you have to use the things that we've talked about in this. I really, 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 truly do. So be safe.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for this Black Hills Information Security webcast. We do this all the time. We like to give away as much knowledge as we possibly can for you and your benefit. And then we do like 5 seconds of advertising. So if you ever need a red team, threat hunt, pen test, active SOC, IR services, high value people, you know where to find us.
Oh, we'll be at B-Sides Charm. Come hang out.
We'll be at B-Sides Charm. Come hang out. All right, everybody. Have a great day. All right, Ryan, kill it with fire. Kill it.
Fire. Yeah, hey, whoa. That was part 3. Come on back. I know you've got this on in the background, but if you watch part 3, it's really weird to start at 3 and not watch part 1 and 2. So you definitely want to go back and watch parts 1 and 2 if you haven't seen them. And if you watched all 3 parts and you're here, well, hey, thanks for sticking around. We really hope you learned how to live like a criminal, but maybe not be a criminal. And if you liked that, you're definitely going to like the rest of our content. So check out the links below for more content from Black Hills Information Security and all of our tribe of companies, and get notified when you subscribe and hit the little bell so you know when more cool stuff like this is coming out, because we want you to feed the algorithm, because when you feed the algorithm, we make more content, and when we make more content, the algorithm gets fed, and all praise the algorithm. The links below, the algorithm needs it.